Ezekiel chapter 27. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Thou therefore, O son of man, take up a lamentation for Tyre, and say to Tyre that dwelleth at the entry of the sea, being the mart of the people for many islands, Thus saith the Lord God, O Tyre, thou hast said, I am of perfect beauty, and situate in the heart of the sea. Thy neighbors that built thee have perfected thy beauty. With fir trees of Senir they have built thee with all sea planks. They have taken cedars from Libanus to make thee masts. They have cut thy oars out of the oaks of Bashan, and they have made thee benches of Indian ivory, and cabins with things brought from the islands of Italy. Fine broidered linen from Egypt was woven for thy sail, to be spread on thy mast. Blue and purple from the islands of Elisa were made thy covering. The inhabitants of Sidon and the Arabians were thy rowers. Thy wise men, O Tyre, were thy pilots. The ancients of Gebal and the wise men thereof furnished mariners for the service of thy various furniture. All the ships of the sea and their mariners were thy factors. The Persians and Lydians and the Libyans were thy soldiers in thy army. They hung up the buckler and the helmet in thee for thy ornament. The men of Arad were with thy army upon thy walls round about. The Pygmeans also that were in thy towers hung up their quivers on thy walls round about. They perfected thy beauty. The Carthaginians, thy merchants, supplied thy fairs with a multitude of all kinds of riches, with silver, iron, tin, and lead. Greece, Thubal, and Mosach, they were thy merchants. They brought to thy people slaves and vessels of brass. From the house of Thagorma they brought horses and horsemen and mules to thy market. The men of Dedan were thy merchants. Many islands were the traffic of thy hand. They exchanged for thy price teeth of ivory and ebony. The Syrian was thy merchant. By reason of the multitude of thy works, they set forth precious stones, and purple, and broidered works, and fine linen, and silk, and chodchod in thy market. Judah and the land of Israel, they were thy merchants, with the best corn. They set forth balm, and honey, and oil, and rosin in thy fairs. The men of Damascus were thy merchants, in the multitude of thy works, the multitude of diverse riches, in rich wine, in wool of the best color. Dan and Greece and Mosul have set forth in thy marts wrought iron. Stacte and Calamus were in thy market. The men of Dedan were thy merchants, in tapestry for seats. Arabia and all the princes of cedar, they were the merchants of thy hand. Thy merchants came to thee with lambs and rams and kids. The sellers of Seba and Raamah, they were thy merchants, with all the best spices and precious stones and gold, which they set forth in thy market. Haran and Chin and Eden were thy merchants. Saba, Ashur, and Chelmad sold to thee. They were thy merchants in divers manners, with bales of blue cloth and of embroidered work, and of precious riches, which were wrapped up and bound with cords. They had cedars also in thy merchandise. The ships of the sea were thy chief in thy merchandise, and thou wast replenished and glorified exceedingly in the heart of the sea. Thy rowers have brought thee into great waters. The south wind hath broken thee in the heart of the sea. Thy riches and thy treasures and thy manifold furniture, thy mariners and thy pilots who kept thy goods and were chief over thy people, thy men of war also that were in thee, with all thy multitude that is in the midst of thee, shall fall in the heart of the sea in the day of thy ruin. Thy fleets shall be troubled at the sound of the cry of thy pilots. And all that handled the oar shall come down from their ships. The mariners and all the pilots of the sea shall stand upon the land. And they shall mourn over thee with a loud voice, and shall cry bitterly. And they shall cast up dust upon their heads, and shall be sprinkled with ashes. And they shall shave themselves bald for thee, and shall be girded with haircloth, and they shall weep for thee with bitterness of soul, with most bitter weeping. And they shall take up a mournful song for thee, and shall lament thee. What city is like Tyre, which is become silent in the midst of the sea? Which by thy merchandise that went from thee by sea didst fill many people, which by the multitude of thy riches and of thy people didst enrich the kings of the earth. Now thou art destroyed by the sea. Thy riches are in the bottom of the waters, and all the multitude that was in the midst of thee is fallen. All the inhabitants of the islands are astonished at thee, and all their kings, being struck with the storm, have changed their countenance. The merchants of people have hissed at thee. Thou art brought to nothing, and thou shalt never be any more. From PrayLamp, peace be with you.